Hello everyone, Jay Warden here and welcome to my recap and review of the episode Justice, another hilariously bad episode of TNG. Look, I promise this show will eventually get good, okay? Just remember, spoilers are ahead, otherwise do try to enjoy. After delivering some colonists in a nearby star system, the Enterprise has discovered another M-class planet next door which is inhabited by a primitive society called the Edo. So, totally ignoring the Prime Directive, Picard has Riker sent down to make contact with them and see what they're like. Dr. Beverly meanwhile is telling Picard that everyone needs a good rest and relax with some well-earned shore leave and suggests this new planet might make a good candidate. Riker arrives back from the survey with a massive grin on his face and reports that it's just bloody marvellous down there. Yar says she's checked up on their local laws and sees nothing to be worried about, something which I'm sure won't be a problem at all later on. She also mentions how they pretty much look for any excuse to fuck, so Picard thinks that this indeed would make a great place for the crew to enjoy their shore leave, so organises another away team to do a better survey and sends Wesley along with them so he can see if it'll be good for the kids too. Data though says he's seeing an odd reading on his sensors as if something's out there but can't see anything, so they just dismiss it as a glitch. The away team beam down and find a species of white, blonde and scantily clad people running about and... Wait a minute, this place looks suspiciously familiar. I'm sure I've seen this... Oh. As the away team pervs out at all the luscious bodies on display, two of the Edo run up to the away team and are introduced as Rivan and Leotor. They welcome them with hugs and dirty looks, and even Worf looks like he might be getting a boner. But they don't know how to deal with Wesley though, because this is a family-friendly show and we can't be having kids knowing too much about sex, so suggests he go play with the other Edo kids. They then all run to the council chambers to discuss having more people beam down and introduce Wesley to the other kids who are dressed slightly more conservatively than everyone else. We then get some incredibly cringe-inducing dialogue and even more pervy camera shots of the Edo at play as they drag the away team off to have some dirty fun. Back on the bridge, Data has ruled out a sensor glitch and is now certain something is out there, but when they look on the view screen they don't see anything. So, without even checking with Picard first, tries to phone the hidden object and ask it to reveal itself, and a giant semi-transparent looking space station appears. It sends a reply back but they don't understand, so Data starts working on a translation while Picard sends LaForge down to a window so he can get a good look with his visor, because apparently the ship's sensors just aren't as good as LaForge's, and it's been a while now since he was asked to use his vision superpowers. But even he can't tell us what's going on except to say that it seems like it's there yet not there at the same time. Data reports the translation as "stand by" when a small white orb emerges from the object, penetrating the ship and wandering about before arriving on the bridge. It flies up to Picard but apparently left its speaker on at maximum volume because when it asks who they are it deafens everyone and causes the ship to shake with the sheer amount of bass. As Picard tries to explain who they are and why they're there, the orb wants to know why it left other humans in the nearby star system and wants to know if they intend to do the same with the planet below them. Picard says they're just curious and they otherwise like colonising random planets because people like new challenges. The orb warns them not to interfere with his children below and then goes over to Data to ask if he wants to network up and have an exchange of information. Picard says go for it and the orb knocks Data out. Back at Starfleet Academy, Wesley is playing with his new friends by showing off his cartwheeling skills before the young girl seems suggestive and asks him to teach him something new, making Wesley all awkward. But she just wants to learn how to play ball because apparently the Edo are unable to understand how to throw a ball. Riker meanwhile asks Worf why he isn't joining in on all the fun, but Worf, showing off just how much of a ladies' man he can be, says he's not interested and that even if he was, the females available to him are a little bit too fragile for his rough and tumble Klingon tastes. Riker then tries to phone the ship to report in but gets no answer, raising concerns something might be wrong, so wants everyone to get back together just in case. Yar is getting a lesson in Edo law enforcement, or general lack thereof, when she learns from Rivan and Leotor that long ago they were a barbaric culture, but now everything is all peaceful and happy, and explain that they have a randomised punishment zone that if anyone violates are immediately killed, because that seems like the tolerant and civilised thing to do. Yar is immediately alarmed by this because it makes her realise that she really didn't do her homework earlier, and as Worf finds her, immediately informs him of this new enlightening aspect of Edo culture. Concerned about Wesley, they run out to locate him. Wesley and the Edo kids are now running and throwing a ball back and forth to each other, and it's all a good laugh, but then one of the kids makes a long throw and Wesley trips over a white fence into a garden of flowers. The kids make a big deal out of it and seem very troubled, but Wesley doesn't understand and says he's just fine and thanks for asking. Suddenly two chaps in slightly different shitty clothes run over to them. They're mediators who enforce the law and demand to know what happened. As Riker and Choi also join up with them, Wesley tries to explain earnestly that he just fell and it was all a mistake. The mediators say that that's all very sad but they must do their duty now. Yar and Worf also catch up and quickly explain the situation, making Riker upset because he thought Yar was capable of doing her job properly. He tries to apologise but the mediators say that the law is the law and Wesley must now die. As they move forward, Riker floors one of them and the others pull their faces out, leaving a tense situation. Back on the bridge, the transfer between the orb and Data is still ongoing, and Dr. Beverly is trying to determine what's going on when the orb finally finishes and vanishes. At the same time, they also restore communications with the away team, and Riker quickly explains what's going on and that Picard himself should probably beam down pretty quick. Picard agrees and also gets Dr. Beverly to take Data down to sickbay because she's totally an engineering specialist in androids. Picard meets with the Edo Council, and Riker has let them take Wesley into custody with the promise he won't be harmed. Rivan and Leotor cautiously welcome him, but are upset that the away team have stopped them from enforcing their laws, and want to know what the problem is and ask how they deal with criminals. Picard tries to be diplomatic about it, but keeps offending Leotor, so he explains that the Prime Directive prevents him from just taking Wesley, and sadly for us all, he must try to respect their laws. He confirms with them that Wesley won't be harmed, at least until sundown, before asking them if they know of the strange object orbiting their world. They're not sure and think he might be referring to God, so he asks Rivan to come up to the ship with him to see if she can identify it, and she agrees. On the ship, Rivan is in awe of the ship and its technology and is asking lots of questions, but then Dr. Beverly arrives all upset because she's just learnt what's about to happen to Wesley. Picard tells her to please be quiet whilst he shows Rivan the windows, so she can get a good look at the object. She reacts with shock and immediately drops to her knees in fear and confirms, yeah, that's basically God out there. Picard wants to know if she can have a friendly chat with God, but she's shit scared and can't even speak right now. Suddenly, the object starts moving towards the ship and the loud voice from earlier demands they return his child back to the planet. Picard realises some bad shit's about to happen, so quickly gets Rivan beamed back down, and the object retreats back to its original position. As they briefly discuss what just happened, Dr. Beverly says Data has woken up and has much to say. In sickbay, Data explains that the object is some sort of interdimensional vessel which is in several places at once, which is why it's only partially visible. The entities which inhabit it know the Edo worship them as a god, but think it's all harmless fun. But now they know everything about the Federation, including the Prime Directive, and are now very curious to see how Picard is going to handle the situation, perhaps even judge them by their own standards. Data warns that if they ignore their own laws, they may judge them to be deceptive and untrustworthy, and who knows how they might react then, and also speculates that it might not have been a good idea to plonk some colonists down next door. As Dr. Beverly begins to have a good cry, Data finds her grief fascinating and makes inappropriate comments, further upsetting her and making Data realise he probably should have just shut the fuck up. They then have a further discussion about what to do and briefly muse on the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few. But Picard pussies out of such an intellectual debate and simply says he won't let numbers make his decisions. Dr. Beverly arrives to plead with Picard to not let them kill Wesley, and he reassures her that he won't let it happen, regardless of the cost to the ship and the crew. Because he's seen the search for Spock and knows for sure that the needs of the few or the one definitely outweigh the needs of the many, and that it will all work out fine in the end. So he goes to the planet and announces his intention to take Wesley back. The Edo are obviously upset about this, but know they can't really do anything, so let him go. As he tries to beam them back up, nothing happens, and it seems the Edo god has decided to intervene now that Picard has shown that he can't obey his own laws. Annoyed, Picard shouts up to the ceiling and gives them a quick earful about how there's no justice with absolute laws and life is about exceptions and that rules without exceptions can never be just. This brief speech is apparently convincing enough to the Edo god, and it allows them to beam back up to the ship. Back on the bridge, Picard calls the Edo god again and asks for a sign about the colonists they left behind in the other star systems, and in response just vanishes. Picard's a bit disappointed that they didn't learn more, but count themselves lucky before hastily departing. Oh man. The first 15 minutes or so of this episode is really so bad it's good territory, with the utterly corny and horny Edo, the cringe-inducing dialogue, the happy running, and the outfits they wear, which look particularly unflattering on the men. After that though, it becomes a bore of an episode, and another poorly written one. It reminded me somewhat of the TOS episode The Apple, where Kirk and company find another primitive, peace-loving culture who are totally innocent but also guided by a godlike being, though in that case it turned out to be an advanced computer. And yes, once again we have yet another supremely powerful being interfering and judging our intrepid crew. That makes 5 out of 7 episodes now where a powerful entity has been a major factor in the plot of an episode. Season 1 is really relying too heavily on this trope, and it's starting to become annoying. But let's be honest, so far Season 1 has been pretty awful overall, and if TNG had launched in today's world with this level of bad, it would never have gotten past its first season, I think. Thankfully for us Trekkies though, this wasn't to be the case. I do find though that I don't really have a lot to say about this episode, because there just isn't much substance to it. I mean, I do wonder how the Edo as a society actually function in the long run, like, for example, why does the punishment zone change from day to day, and why is it so arbitrary? How does this society build the fairly advanced looking structures but pretty much do nothing but frolic and fuck all day? And why do the entities in orbit even give a fuck about such a culture? The episode never bothers to answer any of these questions, and in the end, I don't really care, and neither do the writers. It just seems like an excuse to get some sexy bodies on display for the most part, before having a moral drama about the rule of law and the value of life. The episode makes a big play of the Prime Directive and how Picard's hands are supposedly tied, but did no one point out that they broke it from the very opening moment of this episode where they say they discovered this primitive culture and then immediately made contact with it? The whole point of the Prime Directive is to not affect or interfere in the affairs of other societies, and with any primitive or pre-warp civilizations specifically, you are banned from making any contact with them because knowledge of your existence to such a society that isn't ready for it can be utterly detrimental to its development, something which TNG will cover again in the future in the much better episodes of Who Watches the Watchers and First Contact. Not the film, that is, the episode First Contact. Regardless, the big moral dilemma here is whether Picard should violate the Prime Directive by ignoring the Edo laws once Wesley breaks them, however inadvertent it was. There's a couple of nice scenes between Picard and Data debating this, but ultimately it falls flat because this situation should never have occurred in the first place. Yar was an idiot for not doing a more detailed security review of their laws by simply asking the question, what is the punishment for breaking your laws? There is the moral question of numbers posed here in terms of, is saving one life worth the possible death of everyone on board the ship? But again, it kind of falls flat because the implication is that if not for the entities in orbit, Picard would totally have just refused to let Wesley be killed and beamed him back to the ship without any hesitation. It's only because of the threat of these powerful beings potentially judging and punishing them does it give Picard any real pause. Also, when Data brings this question up, Picard pretty much avoids the debate by saying he won't let arithmetic decide questions like that, and I think that's A, a big cop-out to an interesting debate, and B, makes Picard look quite irresponsible. The safety of his ship and the lives of his crew, which includes dozens of other children by the way, should always be his top priority, and in prioritising Wesley's life over the lives of everyone else is a failure of that duty. Wesley himself intelligently starts to point this out, but is not really given a choice in the matter. Anyway, once Picard decides he won't let Wesley be killed, the entities in orbit prevent them from beaming back up. But apparently all it takes to convince them is a brief speech about how life is an exercise in exceptions, to which they say, yeah, good enough, and then let them go before disappearing. I found Crusher's histrionics to be awfully acted. I mean, I don't think Gates McFadden ever did that kind of stuff very well in my opinion. She was always much better at doing quieter scenes rather than ones where she ends up trying to shout or be forceful in some way. I did however like Data's total ignorance on her distress and grief, commenting on it like it was just a fascinating display of emotion, which it actually probably is to him, but without realising how tactless and inconsiderate he's being to her feelings. It really shows Data's lack of understanding of human behaviours off quite well, without him having a scene where he babbles on about not understanding a particular word. We also get another bit of development for Worf and some background on how Klingons view sex, and we also get our first Worf one-liner.
Oh, yes.
Nice planet.
Another future recurring theme. I'm ambivalent about how Wesley was used in this episode. I don't really think he should be going on away missions with the crew, even if they thought it was all nice and peaceful down there. He was mildly annoying with his interactions with the other Edo kids, and to be honest, it just felt like they had to shoehorn him in the episode somehow. This plot could have just as easily developed in the same way if another crew member was taken into custody, but I guess with Wesley being a minor, they thought it would add greater weight and value to the story with his young life being potentially extinguished for an utterly absurd crime. So yeah, generally another stinker of an episode, and at this point I really wouldn't blame people for having given up on the show at this point. But things will actually start getting better in the next episode called The Battle, where the Ferengi return and Picard reunites with his old ship. If you enjoyed this video, please do like, subscribe and share. This has been Jay Warden, and I'll see you next time.